I want to normalize for anybody listening, like if you can identify with having something that affects your ability to organize, hey, you cannot beat yourself up. There is no shame, there is no judgment. It's just the way your brain works.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Amanda Kaufman Show. And I am delighted to welcome Gayle Gruenberg, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Let's Get Organized, based in Northern New Jersey. She's a certified professional organizer in chronic disorganization, a certified virtual organizing professional, and an organizer coach. She's also the author of Get the Big O Organized and Let's Get Organized workbook series. And in her free time, Gayle enjoys attending events at her kabad, relaxing with a novel, swing dancing, and spending time with her adult children. Gayle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here with you.
Wonderful. So Gayle and I met because earlier this year I joined a new networking organization called the Dames, and Gayle was so courageous and amazing. She reached out, she found out I had a podcast. She reached out, she said, "Can we talk?" And when I found out what she did, I was like, absolutely. I couldn't wait. So again, Gayle, welcome to the show. Yeah. So, Gayle, talk to me a little bit about how you got into being the queen of organization. Like, what is it about this that caused you to build a whole business around it, to build books around it, the whole thing? Catch me up.
Okay, well, there's a long story, a short story, and a medium story, but in essence, it started out because I did not enjoy, all right, I'll be just totally honest, I hated being a CPA, a certified public accountant.
Yes.
Oh, it was like soul sucking and just like I forgive me for being graphic, but I would rather have cut my wrists than stayed in that profession.
That is a sign, ladies and gentlemen. And you know
Yes.
what? Like, I think a lot of our listeners are in that situation where they picked a pathway and they're like, it's no longer aligned. Like, it felt like achievement, but it's no longer aligned. And that's part of what's causing them to look at entrepreneurship and to build a business around their expertise. I love it. So good for you for making that leap. Now, I've got to ask you, like, what did it take for you to transition from being a CPA to being an expert that gets hired by other people for something completely different, the organization? What'd that take?
In order to get to the level of expertise where I am now, well, I've been an organizer. This is my now 22nd year.
Stop it.
It's amazing that the time has gone
Really?
like that. Crazy. And what I've done is I have tried to equip myself with as much knowledge and experience as possible. So I went the route of NAPO, which is now the National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals.
I
Used to be
didn't even
national.
know about this.
Yeah.
OM to the G. Okay,
Yeah.
so there's a national organization. All right.
There is.
So cool.
And we have I don't want to say a subset, but kind of like we have a specialty group, which is called the Institute for Challenging Disorganization. So
Interesting.
I could go on ad infinitum about the ICD. So I've taken as much education as I can, teleclasses and reading and conferences, and my clients have taught me so much. The body of knowledge has built organically over time, as well as the actual physical education, because the CPOCD credential is like getting a master's degree in chronic disorganization.
Wow.
It takes about 2 years, and it's a serious track of education.
It really does sound like it. And, mad respect. Like, I think that that's amazing. And I'm just so curious, like, is this coming because you were always the tidy child, and you always had like your pencil sharpened to the same length and like you just like that's been your your normal? Or were you a hot mess express that like solved it and then wanted to solve it for other people? Like or was it some other impetus? Because like you're clearly a brilliant person. You got a CPA, like that's no slouch, to then turn around and go so deeply immersed in this subject. Like where'd that come from?
Boy, lots and lots of answers here. Okay, so as a small child, yes, I was a train wreck.
You were a train wreck. Okay.
Complete train wreck. I remember the top of my dresser, I would build it up and then things would fall and I'd have to clean it up. And somehow, some way along the line, and I think it probably was somewhere around second grade when my teacher dumped out my desk. And it was so shameful. And I think that might have been it. That was probably the year because ironically, I also had strep. I had a strep infection that year. And
Mhm.
there is something of a correlation between strep and OCD,
Really?
which I've picked that up along the line. So I think those two very traumatic events kind of pushed me toward being a much more organized person, as well as I might have a bit of a genetic component because my parents and my grandparents, my dad is an architect, so everything was all nicely planned, and my mom, as the product of my grandparents, was very linear, and my grandmother was called the mothball kid because she had everything like so nicely lined up and labeled. Well, I can't fight my nature.
That's so funny. That's really interesting. I love it. So talk to me a little bit about the kinds of people that you work with. So who do you find needs you the most?
I have the best freaking clients in the world.
I love hearing that. I love hearing that. Like that's what I'm always preaching, to people is like you want dream clients, Entrepreneurship is hard enough as it is. You don't want to work with jerks. You don't want to work with people that you find like are deflating to your soul. So what is it that these amazing clients have in common that they end up coming to you?
Well, my specialty is in chronic disorganization, which is a rather large umbrella encompassing
Mhm.
many possible brain based challenges like ADHD, OCD, depression, anxiety, traumatic brain injury. Clients that just, the way their brains work is different from what people will say is normal.
Mhm.
And we want to say neurotypical, but we know that there really is no such thing because normal is the setting on a washing machine.
I love that. Yes, that's so true. So often like neurodivergent or they've experienced some sort of a trauma that causes them to process and think differently.
Yes, absolutely. And often it's the prefrontal cortex which governs our executive functions that may not be quite so stimulated in people who have executive function challenges. And that's okay. I want to normalize for anybody listening, like if you can identify with having something that affects your ability to organize, hey, you cannot beat yourself up. There is no shame, there is no judgment. It's just the way your brain works. And then we
It's
try
just
to,
different, right? Like
yeah.
I think the as somebody who has experienced like quite a bit of non-normalcy in the way that I think about things, like I know what it's like to carry a lot of shame attached to that, but there's so much freedom in accepting like it's just different. It's just different. Like, and also possibly there might even be superpowers that you have access to that normies wouldn't, So like honor it.
Amen to that. Because there are things that people like, okay, I'm left brain and very linear thinking, but then right brain and creative people, there is no way in hell I can do what right brain people do because they are just off the charts brilliant.
It's so good. It's so good. So they have like this different way of thinking and perceiving of the world. Is there a correlation between neurodivergence or different abled thinking that causes more clutter? Like, is that a connection?
Well, that's yes, I would say sometimes yes, because sequencing and categorizing and I'm just my brain is going so fast, so it's not really staying in the track. And many other of the executive functions that contribute to organizing, they're not always as prevalent,
Hmm.
and it might not be as important to someone who is a more creative thinker, like putting everything in a box and making it all line up and look pretty and all of that is like, why am I going to spend my time doing that when I'm just going to mess it up again anyway? So that's where the confluence of the two types of person sometimes work really well together.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I've noticed in my own ADHD experience that when I care about something, that's where the neat Nick comes out, right? Like that's where I'm like, I'd call this like a hyper focus episode where I get hyper focused and I can activate a side of my brain that it's just like But if you look at the rest of my house, it's like, does she even care? And it's like, actually, I don't. And that's one of the reasons why the dishes might go a little longer than somebody else's dishes, or the laundry might go a little longer. Or, I'm just looking around my office. One of the biggest culprits for me is that I'm a verbal thinker. So I have journals on journals on journals, right? And yeah, it's like it is awesome, but then it can sort of create like some chaos sometimes. So, what would you say to someone who is considering whether they should go to the extent of hiring a coach or even just get started themselves with better organization habits if they don't innately gravitate towards that? I guess first of all, like why would they? And then what are like some tips to get them started?
Yes. So for someone who's going to want to start an organizing project and they feel like, okay, I can do this myself, awesome. Just start and start small so that you have this wonderful feeling of that sense of accomplishment of like, yeah, okay, you know what, I can do this. And it builds confidence and a project takes on momentum. So that the successes build on one another. And someone who might be considering hiring a coach or an organizer, I would say don't hesitate, because if you get to the point where you're like, you know what, forget this, I am good at XYZ and someone else is good at ABC, and why don't we just, merge the two talents? Like I often say, I can't do cardiac surgery, so I'm going to hire someone who can.
I mean, that's a reasonable idea.
Right?
You're actually making me think of one of my favorite books, entrepreneurial books, which is Who Not How. You
Yes.
know, right? Exactly. It's like it's okay if you don't innately have these skills or talents because someone definitely does. And so can you walk me through like when you do work with someone, like what would they expect that experience to be like?
Well, the first we do is a phone call. Usually someone will call and say, I need your help, please. And
Mhm.
I personally like to have a Zoom because then I can connect with the person and I can read their facial expressions and get a feeling for them, in their motions and their voice. So I like to build that rapport. And then if they say, all right, you know what, this is great, let's think about it. So we have that nice initial conversation where we do get deep, because in my experience, organizing is not about the stuff. It's about what's going on in your head and your heart, and that just
Mm.
manifests in your space. So if it's your space you want to organize, we want to know what's going on the inside. And we
Mm.
talk about like what are your core values, and we talk about, like you said, verbal processing. What are your processing modalities? What are your sensory preferences? Let's get the whole person involved. And what are the challenges you're facing? What are your strengths and talents? And then on site, step 3 is to actually start to clear. So I have my 7-step process, which is in the book, and it's consult, consider, clear, categorize, contain, control, and coach.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I think that one of the biggest things that I've noticed in my own experience and family members, and just like whenever there's a clutter or disorganization challenge, or even in clients, because often I do a lot of digital marketing with coaches. And if you are a hot mess express with your assets and how you're going about doing your digital organization, that can actually cause ton of friction in your execution and a lot of frustration. Like I'm working on a new bundle that I'm going to be offering for helping new coaches get their first 5 clients, and I went crazy for like a good 2 hours a few days ago because I couldn't locate a video file. So like it basically reduced it down to like, all right, I'm just going to reshoot the thing. But I think that experience both digitally and in the real world, it causes so much friction. And I've noticed like a lot of people these days, even if they don't identify as neurodivergent or they've never been diagnosed as neurodivergent, there's almost like this increase in those tendencies of not holding attention, not slowing down to organize, being in a rush all the time, being overwhelmed all the time. Like I can really see how that clutter can really creep up on people quickly.
And the time just goes so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And we're bombarded with so much all the time that it's hard to maintain control.
Exactly. So, do you find like a lot of the people that you work with are they typically like business owners, or are they often working in corporate, or are they kind of all over the place?
Well, my current mix, I have a few people coming in lately who are older adults, seniors in their mid 70s to mid 80s, and they've been either disorganized most of their lives, which is part of the definition of chronic disorganization, or they have these physical challenges that all of a sudden have crept up on them and they just can't maintain things anymore. A
Mm,
couple of ladies with TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, a couple of retirees, like ladies in their mid 60s, who are just like, I can't get it together. Um, and now they have the time and the finances to be able to address these challenges.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, that makes a lot of sense that in that season of life, you would want more peace as well. And that would probably contribute a lot. So, a lot of people that listen to this show, they are either starting a business or they're looking to narrow in their focus. And what you've done is an extremely wonderful example of how you can take like a passion or an interest of yours. You can get the professional credentials for it. You know, you do the work and then you can earn that. And there's even associations around this. If somebody is like, oh my gosh, you know, this is the thing that I want to pursue, I want to become an organization expert, what would you say is the best next step for them to take?
I would say familiarize yourself with NAPO and ICD
Hmm.
and see if either of those resonates with you, because there are definitely education tracks in both. And also think about the kind of person you'd like to work with.
That's so good.
Yeah, because sometimes people who are chronically disorganized can be challenging.
Hmm.
They can be stubborn and really dig in their heels and say, I don't want to change. And then there are those who are like, you know what, I don't care, just go do it because I'm too busy, and do whatever you want in my space. So there are two schools of thought in my view.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's where the coaching really does come in, of just being able to really listen, have compassion. I love how in your process you start with what are your values, what are your preferences for processing, all of those things. Those are pretty universal no matter what kind of coaching you do. You want to make sure that you're operating from that place, ideally, because, an idea thought is always going to be much more powerful than an idea planted. And I think a common misconception of what it is to be a coach is to be like bossy pants on somebody else's life. And that's like not our role, right? Our role is to facilitate a process that helps them get there faster with greater confidence or avoiding unnecessary cost. So I love it. I love how you do it, Gayle. For the listeners that want to follow you and see what else you're up to, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best way is to come to the website, which is lgorganized.com.
Wonderful. And I understand there's a book available on that website.
There is. You can download at least the first chapter. It's on the website right at the top. You can click the purple button.
I
The book is
love
called
it.
Get the Big O.
Get the big O, get organized. I love it. So good. Well, Gayle, thank you so much for joining me on the Amanda Kaufman Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And listener, hey, do us a favor and leave a review, an honest review, which I honestly think Gayle did a 5 star out of 5 for this episode. That's my personal take. But seriously, if you just take a moment to rate the episode and to leave a 30-second review, it'll help people to choose this episode when they go out for their walk or when they're about to take a long drive. And we really, really appreciate you doing that. In fact, if you've got some friends who would love to hear that, chronic disorganization, there are solutions, you could share it with a friend that way. Or if you've got another coachy friend that you think might be really interested in pursuing this niche of coaching, then go ahead and grab the link to the episode and text it forward to them. And when you share it with like 3 people, you're going to be spreading a lot of good in the world. My name is Amanda Kaufman, and we will be back with our next episode very soon. We'll see you soon.